Introducing the perfect companion to your morning listening routine. AG1's clinically backed formula is now flavor-packed with 3 new delicious flavors: tropical, berry, and citrus. Start the day on a high note with probiotics that taste like the tropics. Mix it up with micronutrients that taste like berry or citrus. And take it all the way back with the classic, AG1 Original, with notes of pineapple and vanilla. Do your health a flavor, or 4, with AG1 Next Gen, the daily health drink. Learn more at drinkag1.com.
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contrast. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan. $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
My next guest is another superb economist. We had Art Laffer in the first hour, and now I'm so pleased to have Tom Philipson. Tom Philipson was and still is a professor of economics at the University of Chicago. So you know all the great economists who came out of the University of Chicago. I think they have like 5 Nobel Prize winners, and Tom may be one someday soon as himself. He also served as the chairman of Donald Trump's Council of Economic Advisors in his first term. And now he's working with me on a really cool project we're doing at Unleashed Prosperity called Most Favored Patient. And this project is to try to show the politicians how it is that we can lower healthcare costs, because, healthcare costs have been rising dramatically, but also keep the innovation that makes for cures and all sorts of treatments for ailments and diseases, because we obviously want to win the race for the cure. So first of all, Tom, thanks for joining.
Good to be with you, Steve.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Well, first of all, just give me your sense, because you're one of the top economists in the country. We've got the first 7 months of the Trump administration. You served ably for him in his first term. How do you feel like things are going with respect to the economy and what Trump is doing?
Well, he had to do a lot of resets, so I'm very optimistic on the next 7 months or a few years relative to the reset. He had to rebalance some of our trading relationships, obviously, which stirred up a lot of uncertainty. But I think we're over that now. I think that uncertainty has settled, and then people overestimated from the beginning. I said in February that tariffs are not going to be inflationary because, one, inflation is caused by fiscal and monetary policy, not tariffs, which may raise prices on certain goods. But also the tariff revenue is tiny, $200-300 billion, even if it's $400 billion. Some of that gets eaten by suppliers, but let's say half gets pushed on to consumers. That's less than 1% of total consumption, which is 2/3 of our GDP, so about $20 trillion. So that has been exaggerated. I think that paranoia has settled. And now, obviously, with the big, beautiful bill with the tax incentives there, there's a lot to be optimistic about. And that's why I think the second quarter revision reinforced that on the GDP numbers.
Yeah, a great assessment. I couldn't agree more. Okay, so let us get into the project that you've been working on that is really very exciting, because this is a big problem, the runaway costs of healthcare in the United States, and that we pay more. Let's face it, we pay more than most other countries do, although I do believe we have superior quality of care in the United States. But the goal here is to try to find ways we can cut costs, but continue to have the high level of access to the best services and the innovation. So can you tell folks some of the ways we can do that?
Yeah, many organizations like WHO and other are very misguided. Their ranking U.S. healthcare is very low on the totem pole, yet every rich person who gets sick wants to come to U.S. for care,
right?
Essentially,
right.
So yes. that tells you that our
by the way, even kings and princes of countries come to the United States for healthcare.
Exactly. So that tells you the quality is higher, but also therefore the price is higher, obviously. And we've done studies showing that you live longer as a cancer patient in the U.S. than in Europe, et cetera, because of those quality differences, essentially. So that is an issue that people don't fully realize, that, you know, you kind of get what you pay for. And in the U.S., you get a lot better care than in other countries, typically. But the project is aimed essentially, which you know, hit it right on the nail on the head, which is, you know, a lot of platforms just want to have government come in and control prices without thinking about what does this do to innovation. And other people just want to have innovation, thinking about what does this do to how much people pay for things. And this, I think, is the first platform that tackled those both by arguing we can lower prices, particularly for drugs, and still increase innovation. And that's the whole goal of the platform.
So one of the things that angers a lot of my listeners, and I hear from them all the time, is the fact that it seems unfair to a lot of people, including myself many times, that we spend billions and billions of dollars here in America to develop these new blockbuster drugs that save lives, and, the cancer treatments, the heart disease, the things for neurological disorders, the amazing innovation that goes on in the United States. And so we develop these things partly with, money from the federal government, but mostly private investment. And then we pay more, Tom, for these drugs than people in Canada pay or Europe pay. And people feel that's very unfair.
Yeah, there's a couple of things going on here. Pharmaceuticals or biopharma is really a poster child for the Trump agenda, because we have one of the largest trade deficit in goods is pharmaceuticals. So we are basically, paying a lot more for drugs coming into the country than we're getting paid for drugs that we developed in the U.S.
That doesn't even make any sense. We are the innovation leader, yet we have a trade deficit with the world. And the reason is government policy, which is, Trump argues trade flows, some of it is not all of it is given by government policy, but some of it is. And really the key is the non-tariff trade barrier of price controls in European countries. So we sell for dirt cheap, below value in their countries. They get to sell at market prices for new drugs in our country. That's induced by government policy. That would not happen in a free market. And that is a government-induced trade deficit, essentially, for the biggest part of the goods deficit. So what do we do about it? How can we make sure that the Europeans and the Canadians and the Japanese, and especially people in rich, fairly rich countries, are bearing some of the costs? Because why should the United States bear all of the cost of the innovation? They're free riders, aren't they?
Exactly. We pay for brand name drugs about 3 times more than they pay for it. And that's what drives innovation. We pay less for generics. So overall, we spend less on drugs on average, because generics is 93% of prescriptions. But we pay more for brand name drugs. And our proposal is essentially we take a NATO approach to medical innovation, meaning countries should be asked to spend a certain share of their GDP on innovative drugs. And the Europeans will scream to that and say, we can't afford U.S. prices. But that's misguided, because they're spending more in total on drugs, because they're spending twice as much. Their prices are twice as high on generics, which I said is the vast majority of prescriptions. So if they would have generic policy like in the U.S. and then increase their spending on brands, they could lower their spending essentially overall, and then decrease free riding with less total spending in the EU, let's say.
So we did a poll at by the way, people can go to Most Favored Patient website and you can see some of the work we're doing. Some of the polling result really shows that voters really support the kinds of policies you're talking about, Tom, and that voters do want, but we want the best of both worlds. We want lower prices and high quality of care and innovation. And so you're telling us that this can happen. We can make it happen with better government policy.
Yeah, I think the issue here on support from patients is that a lot of them like direct-to-patient distribution. Like it's been estimated about 50 cents on the dollar of innovations go to intermediaries, whether that's insurance companies, wholesalers, PBMs, etc. That means that if we can cut those intermediary costs, essentially, we can still preserve the incentive to innovate to manufacturers who get 50 cents on the dollar. But if we can just cut those costs, that can lower the price for consumers, meaning employers and patients, etc. at the same time. So part of the problem we have with middlemen is, which I'm against regulating more. Part of the problem is the concentration. So PBM, you have three massive companies essentially, and it's more FTC, DOJ antitrust issue to basically break up because given their size, essentially, they can get enormous amount of advantages and get a lot of returns from the manufacturers in distributing their drugs. And that's the real issue. Once we need those middlemen markets to be a lot more competitive, and also Tom, go direct to patients.
Explain, because I'm a little fuzzy on this, and if I am, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are, because I'm more of a student than this on this. But what is a pharmacy? I hear that term all the time. We always hear it. The pharmacy benefit manager, the PBMs. Who are they? What do they do? Tell us who are these people?
Express Scripts, and Caremark and others are the largest, but. What they do is essentially they manage the pharmacy part of a health insurance plan, essentially. But therefore, they have enormous power because they can put, drugs on the formulary, being where they go on the formulary, essentially, whether they get picked first or whether they get picked second, where exactly they are. And therefore, they can basically have it. It's good because they can represent consumers and get lower prices than consumers going alone. But it's bad because they have so much market power that they extract an enormous price for providing that service.
And now who owns the, they're owned by the insurance companies, the hospitals, the doctors. Who owns these PBMs?
Yeah, some of them are merged with the insurance company. It used to be that some of them were actually involved with the pharma companies, but some of them are merged. But it's really a concentration issue. Like the three big guys are about 85% of the market, and it's really, in my view, a concentration. Instead of trying to regulate what they do, I think it's much more of an issue that we need to get deregulation to get competition in this market.
Amen. So one last question before I let you go. I'm talking to the great economist, Tom Philipson, who was the chairman of Donald Trump's Council of Economic Advisors in his first term. He now works with me on a lot of issues at Unleash Prosperity, and he's also the director of a new group that is called Most Favored Patient, which is how do you lower costs of our healthcare system without impeding the quality of it. So explain just in a few minutes, if you could, why it is that price controls on drugs are not the solution.
Yeah, I think the most favored nation price controls that's been discussed, essentially, they want to have regulation. It's a price control that basically dictates that U.S. gets the best price in the world. The problem with that is that the U.S. is currently, with its free market pricing, about 70% of earnings for the average drug. And so no one is going to sacrifice their U.S. market to match, let's say, Canada's price. So Canada is about 5% of revenue relative to the U.S. because they're, 10% of our population, and they have price controls, which we don't have as much. So basically, no one's going to price to Canada's prices to keep the U.S. the lowest price. What's going to happen is you're going to force Canada, if you can, to come up to U.S. prices. If you cannot, which is likely, you will abandon Canada. You're not going to walk away from your U.S. market to please Canada, essentially. So that if that's the case, we will have more free riding as opposed to less, because those countries will then come in when things go generic, or they will compulsory license the drugs when they say you're not going to sell to us, etc. So that will mean U.S. prices will stay the same, but you will have more free riding. That's sort of an extreme version of what will happen.
But also you will get less innovation, right? Because at some point now, the last thing I'll ask you, Tom, is you did a pretty famous study showing the benefits to mankind and to our economy from drug innovation. It's a huge, huge contributor to human well-being.
Yeah, in general, medical innovation is not just drug innovation, because if you look at the studies by a guy called Kevin Murphy and Robert Tappel at University of Chicago, they did a very famous study where they basically showed that during the last century, the growth in health was on par with all GDP growth in terms of generating value. Think about it. You lived twice as long during that period, let's say from 35 to whatever, 70. So generating health is the most valuable thing we have. People know that anecdotally, but also shows up in the economic numbers, right? So health is an extremely important, it's our most important asset, essentially.
Yes.
So improvements in health are so important, and that's why medical innovation, which was roughly half of that gain, essentially, was medical innovation, is so important.
So my sister has a daughter who is, so she's my niece, has epilepsy. And I always said, she would give $1 million if she could have a cure for epilepsy. So, sometimes we take the value of these life-saving drugs for granted.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is it's very short-sighted because, like I said, 93% of prescriptions are generic from things that were innovated in the past. So that's most of what we consume as drugs. So if you basically shut off the 7% of innovation in prescriptions, you're not generating great health in the future because most of the future is past innovations that are really, really cheap.
Well, Tom, that is great analysis. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And I think this project has so much hope. It is called Most Favored Patient, how we can lower costs and increase innovation in our medical industry.
Thanks for listening to More Money with Steve Moore. You can hear More Money with Steve Moore Saturday afternoons at 1. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
Roger Stone here for Colonial Metals Group. They nailed every call on gold's explosive rally, beating the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, even Bitcoin. And now they're warning the next surge is already underway. Get their free gold guide now at freegoldguide.com/stone or call 800-747-6589. That's 800-747-6589. Learn how to move your savings into physical gold, 100% tax-free. That's freegoldguide.com/stone.
The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power and advanced Audi tech, the next chapter of Audi is here.